Well, I'm going to do just one on a Crip nation. I, I think I mentioned to you. I don't if you're not familiar with the term Crip, it is one that um, at least we'll say the more activist of disabled people in our midst have embraced. I'd say a little along the line of the LGBTQ plus community embracing the term queer that once was a real well, what's a good word, not a positive term, and has been sort of reappropriated. And so also it is with Crip, and this is a Crip nation. And really the nation she has in mind is, of course, primarily Israel. Um, Page 131, you probably read this and already saw. Does the limp, remember this, this is the limp of Jacob after his wrestling with the stranger with a capital S all night long, prior to encountering his brother Esau. Does the limp have anything to do with Israel itself? Jacob, of course, becomes Israel in the wake of this wrestling match. As a nation, as a people who dance with God, does this people wrestle with ever and again, succumbing to, that is giving into or being overcome by, that condition that they must refuse as a people, slavery or colonization? Micah 4 seems to suggest this metaphoric disablement figuratively marks them as a nation. In that day, says the Lord, I will assemble the lame. The lame I will make the remnant, and those who were cast off, a strong nation. So that does, in fact, seem to have interesting resonances with the limping Jacob, who we're told limped the rest of his life after the divine stranger cheated somehow in that wrestling match. Grabbed him someplace that really hurt. That's all I'll say about that. Rather than proving to be a perimeter of exclusion, the stigmata of disablement marks out these people. These people make meaning and value in relation to the marks life carves on their flesh. I like the next paragraph too, but I'm going to interpose here that while I like the argument she's constructing, we have to also realize or be realistic about the fact that the laws of Moses excluded people with any kind of visible irregularity or deformity from entering into the temple or being a part of the assembly of Israel. So there's that. And eunuchs were among those, which I'll just say, interestingly enough, Jesus seems to have a different opinion about eunuchs in Matthew chapter, I don't know where it is, the chapter about divorce. And of course, a eunuch is one of the early, in fact, an Ethiopian eunuch, so a black guy who's a eunuch, non-Jew, is one of the early converts to the Christian faith in the book of Acts, all of which are speaking more or less directly to the laws of Moses that seem to exclude, those with a limp and those with missing testicles or eunuchs, or I think even like maybe the blind and all kinds of people that were not allowed. So you have this little bit of dissonance here. Next paragraph. A Crip nation remembers that it was but a slave in Egypt, refuses humiliation, and casts the cloak of shame back on its colonizers. And maybe the problem here is that the colonized became colonizers themselves. Isaiah 42 likewise either seems to suggest the servant leadership of one who had been blinded, Isaiah 42:19, or once again puts such metaphors of blindness and deafness, which I have connected with economic and political practices of enslavement. And that's a neat and important part of this chapter. She talks about it even a little bit on the previous page. At the pivotal heart of being a covenant people, if only. But we can say, to whatever degree that's true of the people of Israel, it should be even more the case with the followers of a crucified, humiliated Messiah who, as we've said in class, continues to bear his wounds in his resurrected state, thus demonstrating that true history of suffering and humiliation is not gotten rid of or erased or in any way, there's another word I want to use here, canceled out, but is in fact an important aspect of this resurrected Messiah's being. And the text that I know we talked about the lamb standing as though slain. There's a third one besides Jesus showing the wounds in that text in Revelation. I might as well throw it in here. Paul in 1 Corinthians writes that he says, when I came to you, Corinthians, I was determined. I determined within myself that I would know nothing, or I would not consider anything significant other than Jesus the Messiah and him crucified. And you might go like, well, why not and resurrected? Of course he believed that the crucified Messiah was resurrected. But here he simply says that the Jesus the Messiah and that Messiah crucified. And what I want to point out, I learned in seminary that the Greek tense of that word crucified is the perfect tense. I guess it would have to be past perfect, but the perfect tense implies not just that he was crucified in the past, but that the true effects of crucifixion continue. I know one scholar suggested that we could translate it as the one who still bears the marks of crucifixion, or something like that. Jesus the Messiah who yet bears those crucifixion wounds, that kind of thing. Christ crucified. And all of this, I think, plays into what she wants to say about a covenant people. Back to her, given the presumptions of modernity, right, that we've been talking about, especially modernity's social group grid overlay of normal/deviant, that a self-asserting Crip nation proves the subjective center of the narrative named the history of Israel comes as quite the surprise. Yes, it does. And again, we could wish that, perhaps we could wish that it had been more consistently carried out. She then, in fact, talks a great deal about Christianity and some interesting things here. Cultural shift towards the body performed by Christian movements, this is middle of 134, worked to downplay differences of class and gender because the body was one aspect of human being where all shared equally the need for external help, whether slave or emperor, man or woman. I'm thinking about there's a text in Hebrews that says, remember those who are in prison, for you share in the body with them. And I think the idea, it could mean the body of Christ, but it certainly also means you share in bodily existence with them. She goes on to work with Aaron, I think it's Scary, Scarry. It could be scary, but you'd want one less R in it. Very well-known philosopher, though, who talks a great deal about pain and sort of a phenomenology of pain. Last line in that paragraph on 134. It was in that socially prophetic vein, of course, that Christianity situated the body in pain, the body crucified, at the juxtaposition of social forces as its central icon. Of course, that central icon is in many ways the cross, at which point we might wonder if the typically Protestant evangelical dismissal of the Roman Catholic crucifix, well, they still got Jesus on it, that sort of thing. If we haven't been a bit wrong-headed. Yes, Jesus isn't literally on a cross, but he is the Messiah crucified, standing as one slain, still bearing the marks of crucifixion. So both Catholics and actually a lot of Lutherans who are, supposed to be the real Protestants, Lutherans aren't at all afraid to depict Jesus still on the cross as well. Nice stuff at the top of 135. I mean, I don't want to glory in pain, but Christianity wielded this new knowledge of the self as sufferer. Daring such a reversal of signatory power for pain, Christianity offered converts a useful function for pain and a structure for understanding human suffering. And this may be the sort of thing that she was gesturing at earlier when she talked about sort of revisioning pain. And it is true, a lot of the early stories of Christians, I'm thinking right now about a woman named Perpetua, whose story is quite, remarkable and heroic and everything, but really portrays a body in great pain and disfigurement in the end. Boy, there's so much here. 136 at the end of the huge paragraph, about 8 lines up. A Crip nation, in other words, performatively, that is by its stories, performance, judged dominant culture wearing pain, whether etched in the body by disease and debt slavery or as a self-selected sacrifice, judged the dominant culture a prophetic critique of Roman values. The sentence probably needed a little work, but the main thing is a prophetic critique of Roman values. And we could say also modern values regarding the body, right, that we've been talking about. Peter Brown, great biographer of St. Augustine. It's a different book, but at the top of 137, she quotes him and says it was the Christian bishops who invented the poor, that is, as a particular people, and the civic power of bishops who did so much. And this is true. Early Christian bishops, and the most famous of which in this regard is Basil of Caesarea, who is actually a contemporary of Augustine, though he lived well east of Augustine, who was widely known for his conscientious labor, not only for the church, but for the region of Caesarea where he was bishop, in like helping to bring clean water, better health care, all kinds of things that we might now associate with politics that the bishops, early bishops, were very much a part of. So I'm going to go to the last page, 138. At the top, second line, the poor and sick became treasure, an object of cultural desire. Now that can be kind of fetished and unhelpful, but I'm going to go with her line of argument here. Far from forming a pool of permanent social outcasts, as Marcus Borg and John Dominic Crossan have surmised, there were New Testament scholars kind of saying that the people that Jesus healed were being restored, in, all kinds of ways. I'm not sure they're incorrect about all that, but we'll go on with what she says. Women, the untouchables, the poor, the maimed, and the marginalized, to whom compassion was owed. Crips, these bodies wearing their pain in public demonstration and political protest, were the building blocks of the new temple not made with hands. If Isaiah was opposed to the reconstruction of the stone block temple, insisting instead upon a people being a living temple, all of this is more New Testament than it is Isaiah. Then those impure bodies, the colonially disarticulated, were its foundation. Yeah, wow, building blocks of the new temple, that's language of Ephesians, where now surprisingly Gentiles are part of that building block of the temple. And so there is an argument that I think is probably a little bit more New Testament than it is Old, insofar as that Old Testament temple did exclude the obviously crippled, the Crips, if I use that term. So at the end, as Perkins, Phoebe Perkins, reads the early centuries of Christianity, persons turned upon the socio-political structure as the cause of pain. Bodies and pain served as a prophetic critique of that structure. The new people of and for a new earth were those who performatively, by way of the leaping dance, Jacob wrestling with God, dared to rouse social consciences, to generate new economic and political arteries. Wow. At least at this point, she said, maybe not later, maybe not before, but at least at this point, spirit and the body in pain were not obverse disjunct, mutually exclusive, as they were to become in the age of the modern miracle and medical mission. And then she goes on to do the Torah thing here again at the end. I'm not opposed to what she's trying to do, but I think it's more ambiguous to think of the Torah as the champion of, we'll say, the Crip nation, even with this limping Jacob as its founding member. Interesting. Our founding member is the crucified Jesus of Nazareth, humiliated, naked, murdered horribly on a Roman crucifix as a deterrent to uprisings. And hey, that's our guy. All right, that's good. Thanks.